नमस्ते दोस्तों, आपका स्वागत है। मैं हूं वीरेंद्र व्यास और आप देख रहे हैं द बिग बुलियन शो। और आज के हमारे जो मेहमान है, बहुत ही खास मेहमान है। वो हैं वर्ल्ड गोल्ड काउंसिल के ग्लोबल सीईओ डेविड टेट। इनके साथ मैंने कुछ दिन पहले एक पॉडकास्ट रिकॉर्ड किया था और उसके बारे में मैं आपको जानकारी देने वाला हूं दोस्तों। उन्होंने क्या कुछ कहा सोने को लेकर, क्या वर्ल्ड गोल्ड काउंसिल का विजन है, वो सारी चीजें हमने इस पॉडकास्ट में डिस्कस की। पॉडकास्ट इंग्लिश में, पर उसका मोटा मोटी जो सार है मैं आपको हिंदी में बता देता हूं कि डेविड टेट ने क्या कुछ कहा। आजकल दोस्तों टोकनाइजेशन की बहुत बात हो रही है, डिजिटल गोल्ड की बहुत बात हो रही है। तो मैंने उनसे सवाल पूछा था कि डिजिटल गोल्ड और टोकनाइजेशन को लेकर आप इतनी चर्चा क्यों कहते हैं। तो उनका ये मानना था कि डिजिटल गोल्ड और टोकनाइजेशन, इन दोनों में अंतर को समझना जरूरी है। डिजिटल गोल्ड जो उनका प्रोजेक्ट है, ये बहुत बड़ा प्रोजेक्ट है। इसमें जो होलसेल मार्केट है उसको डिजिटल बनाया जाएगा। इसमें आप बैंक के भरोसे नहीं, बल्कि जो सोने के छोटे छोटे यूनिट्स हैं, फ्रैक्शनल गोल्ड के मालिक होंगे। और इससे बैंक दुनिया भर में सोने को कोलेटरल के रूप में इस्तेमाल कर पाएंगे। टोकनाइजेशन जो है वो भविष्य की तकनीक है। उनका ये मानना है कि भविष्य में सोने के टोकन इसी जो डिजिटल गोल्ड है उसके द्वारा ही बैक्ड होने चाहिए। एक चीज जो और उन्होंने बहुत महत्वपूर्ण कही कि जो गोल्ड के प्राइसेस बढ़े, उसमें सबसे बड़ा जो हाथ था वो डेट फियर, यानी जो कर्ज बढ़ता जा रहा है ग्लोबली, उसका बहुत बड़ा हाथ था। लोगों को डर है कि जो इकोनॉमीज हैं वो कर्ज के बोझ तले वहां पर दबकर गिर जाएंगी और जो करेंसीज हैं उनकी भी प्राइसेस गिर जाएंगे। इसी कारण उनका यह मानना है कि गोल्ड के प्राइसेस में वहां पर तेजी आई। सेंट्रल बैंक को लेकर उन्होंने जो बहुत महत्वपूर्ण बात कही, उसमें उन्होंने कहा कि दुनिया भर के जो सेंट्रल बैंक सोना खरीद रहे हैं क्योंकि वे जो है डॉलर से हटकर अपनी जो संपत्ति है उसमें डाइवर्सिफिकेशन चाहते हैं। और कीमतें बढ़ने के बावजूद भी जो सेंट्रल बैंक है वो सोना नहीं बेच रहे हैं। इसका मतलब यह है कि उनके पास अब भी जरूरत के हिसाब से कम सोना है। एक चीज और मैंने इंडिया को लेकर भी उनसे सवाल पूछा था, इवन ईटीएफ्स को लेकर भी सवाल पूछा था। उनका ये मानना है कि भारत जो है ज्वेलरी से इन्वेस्टमेंट की तरफ शिफ्ट हो रहा है। अगर हम देखें तो भारत में ज्वेलरी की मांग कम हो रही है और इन्वेस्टमेंट की मांग बढ़ रही है। और अगर हम देखें आंकड़े तो करीब करीब 17% तक इन्वेस्टमेंट की मांग बढ़ी है। एक चीज जो उन्होंने ईटीएफ को लेकर कही, ईटीएफ पर उनका यह मानना था कि जो यंग जनरेशन है अब पुरानी जो परंपरा है उसको तोड़कर, जैसे पहले वो बैंगल्स खरीदते थे या कुछ और खरीदते थे चीजें सोने की, अब गोल्ड ईटीएफ या क्यूआर कोड के जरिए सोना खरीदना ज्यादा पसंद करेंगे। वो सोने को सिर्फ एक ज्वेलरी नहीं मान रहे हैं, वो अपना पोर्टफोलियो का एक हिस्सा मानते हैं। तो जो न्यू जनरेशन है, यंग जनरेशन है, उसका माइंडसेट चेंज हो रहा है। और ये मैं आपको कई बार बता चुका हूं दोस्तों। और वर्ल्ड गोल्ड काउंसिल के पर्सपेक्टिव से उनका भी यही मानना है। एक चीज और उन्होंने जो बहुत महत्वपूर्ण कही कि जो सप्लाई चेन है, कि आपका सोना कहां से आ रहा है, आज जो सोना खरीद रहे हैं क्या वो एक रिस्पॉन्सिबल गोल्ड है, क्या वो सही जगह से आया है, क्या उसका खनन सही जगह से आया है, क्या उसका खनन सही जगह से हुआ है। भारत में बहुत सारे लोग पवित्र चीजों के लिए सोना उपयोग करते हैं, शादी में देने के लिए उपयोग करते हैं, इवन हम लोग पूजा भी करते हैं। तो आपको ये सवाल जरूर उठाना चाहिए। ऐसा डेविड टेट है, वर्ल्ड गोल्ड काउंसिल के ग्लोबल सीईओ, उनका यह मानना है कि आपको इसे पूछना चाहिए कि आपका जो सोना है वो कहां से आ रहा है। और वो इस मुद्दे को G7 के एजेंडा में भी लाना चाहते हैं। और उन्होंने ग्राहकों से अपील की है जो भी सोना खरीदते हैं कि वो पूछें कि भैया ये सोना आ कहां रहा है, किसी गलत मीन से तो नहीं आया, किसी गलत चीज से तो नहीं आया, या गलत तरीके से तो इसको सोर्स नहीं किया गया है। इसलिए ये सवाल उठाना बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। तो चलिए दोस्तों, अब मैं आपको पूरा जो मैंने पॉडकास्ट रिकॉर्ड किया है मिस्टर डेविड टेट के साथ वो सुनवा देता हूं। और आइए देखते हैं द बिग बुलियन शो।
India's role in the gold market,
India is renowned as a jewellery centre of the world.
and how do you see the gold ETF as a product?
Well, I'm very proud of the effort of the World Gold Council team in promoting gold ETFs as a sector. That's why ETFs are going to grow out of all proportion, because they are physically gold-backed instruments. And I think the younger generation are going to quite relish the idea of buying an ETF with a QR code as opposed to perhaps buying another bangle. But I don't see wars, I don't see tariffs as the major drivers. I see them as noise. The main thing is this debt. perhaps gold tokens in the future will be backed by that digital gold. That's my vision, because you own that gold legally. It's important to distinguish between digitalization of gold and tokenization of gold. Now, everybody who buys gold should be asking, where's it come from? Am I prepared to condone the use of those methods when I buy my gold? Or do I have a choice?
Hello friends, I am Virendra Vyas and you are watching the Big Bullion Show. And today we have with us very special guest, Mr. Tait, World Gold Council CEO. Let's discuss what is his thoughts towards the gold market in India and globally. Hello David, thank you so much for your time. So David, I am seeing you are talking about the digitalization of gold. How big is this in today's terms?
It's important to distinguish between digitalization of gold and tokenization of gold. When I talked about wholesale digital gold, which is our big project, global project, it's about creating a new digitalized market alongside the existing OTC markets that you understand. The current OTC markets have an allocated pillar where exchange of physical bullion, and they have an unallocated pillar where the banks guarantee gold, if you know what I mean. Your relationship is with the bank, not the gold itself. So we decided to take the best bits of both markets, combine them, and create a digital gold market where you would own legally, as you do in the allocated gold market, fractionalized pieces of gold that you own specifically. You no longer have a relationship with the organization, you own that gold. And as a consequence, for the very first time, banks will be able to use it globally, not just in London, everywhere, will be able to use gold as collateral, whereas previously it's simply not been practical to do. Now, what that extends to is the fact that perhaps moving to tokens, perhaps gold tokens in the future will be backed by that digital gold. That's my vision, because you own that gold legally. And it's always confused me in the past why major gold tokens, the Tethers and the Paxoses of the world, the big ones, have not actually really grown in 7 years since I've been in this role. The gold price has gone from 1,000 to 5,000, but their AUM has barely doubled. Why? And my question is, presumably it's about trust or lack of regulation. We haven't been able to establish the reason. But if you could imagine a situation where a gold token is a legal representation of digital allocated gold that you own, irrespective of what the token says, I think that might be the difference. It might be the thing that people have been waiting for to make tokenized gold relevant in today's world. So there is a difference. Digitalization, which is what is an infrastructure play, and tokenization is something that's developing and something still for the future, really. We all talk about it, but it's minuscule in relation to the overall gold market.
Yeah. David, we are seeing in the last 2025 investment demand. If we segregate the demands, then investment is a very big portion is coming. And I think your focus is also on how investment demand should increase.
That's right. Well, I think it's notable that your jewellery demand last year in India, I believe, was roughly 440 tons, and that was down, I believe, 24%. Your investment demand, I believe, was 268. Don't hold me to these numbers, but I think I'm spot on. And that was up 17%. So we've seen a big switch, not just here, but globally, into investment bars and coins and investment products. And that's largely due, in my opinion, to the fact that the markets are focused, well, the world is focused on that strand of debt that runs through nearly every conversation. I believe the major reason that gold has gone up in a straight line, really, has been deep down, deep-seated fear of a debt collapse, the economic situation just collapsing. And I think the biggest fear we have is that the ability to fund this debt that we keep living with eventually becomes too much for us. The currencies devalue, and people continually move into gold. Now that is what I think has been the main driver of gold over the last, well, 5 years, not just recently, 5 or 6 years. And I think we have a situation where if we do not deal with it, then we are faced with a sort of a financial Armageddon. I think the appointment of Kevin Walsh as Fed's chair recently, and you saw the decline in gold, proves my point, because he was considered a safer pair of hands. And so you saw an incredible reaction. I think he's going to soon have an argument with Trump and we'll start going back up. But I don't see wars, I don't see tariffs as the major drivers. I see them as noise. The main thing is this debt. So back to your original question, the investment barrels and coins, I think every human being has that fear. Trump's going to come and go. Wars come and go. Tariffs come and go. What doesn't come and go is how you manage an economy, how you manage your own bank balance. You know if you spend too much, at some point you'll go bankrupt. Countries are the same. We all know that, and that's why gold's going up.
If we see, David, total demand around 5,000 ton total yearly demand, and if we see central banks demand is around 1,000 ton. Since last four years, we are seeing 1,000, 1,100. This year around 820, something like that. How do you see this total? If we see total 3,000 ton around, we mine gold, and this total demand, 30% of this demand is coming from the central banks. Do you see this demand will increase in the future, or how and why the central banks are accumulating so much of gold?
I think the central banks are the main reason they're accumulating is, as I just replied, I think it is that even they understand that they need to have a hedge against a variety of problems. Now, I believe many central banks manage their accounts, manage their reserves, much like you and I manage our personal finances. They know they need to have a fair balance. They need diversity inside their portfolios. But they also generally are central banks who are, let's say, east of Dubai, who are developing central banks, who have relatively low gold reserves, and are looking at Western central banks as an example and saying, okay, well, if they've got all this gold, then maybe I should. There's that portion of central banks. There's other central banks that are very aware of the financial jeopardy that we're in as a globe. There's other central banks who want to steer their ways away from dollar assets. And there are other central banks who have historically had very violent swings in their currencies or suffered with undue inflation and economic volatility. So that combination is still there. Do I think the central banks would continue buying? Yes. Do I think they're going to raise it or lower it? I don't really know. I don't know. What has surprised me is that many central banks, many portfolio managers readjust or reweight their holdings dependent on the nominal value. As the value goes up, they might shed some of that asset because its value has increased, and as a proportion of their reserves, it's grown. But we haven't seen that. And that proves to me that these central banks are still accumulating. Because if they had, for instance, through its value appreciation, hit their limits, they would start shedding. But they're not, even though gold's gone from $1,000 to $5,000, which proves that the proportion of their reserves, that is gold, is still too small. Or to them, is too small. So I expect them to keep buying. I don't expect them to chase the price though.
And how do you see the gold ETF as a product?
Well, I'm very proud of the effort of the World Gold Council team in promoting gold ETFs as a sector. I think that's an important thing to do. India is renowned as a jewellery centre of the world, gold jewellery centre of the world. What is nascent is its use of gold in investment portfolios, whether that be insurance or pensions or asset management. And I think that is the growth area for the future, largely because you have a much younger generation coming through who are with great phone penetration, market penetration electronically. They're more progressive. They understand more about markets and portfolio management than perhaps their parents did. You've got a whole lower and middle class become increasingly educated. And I do think, perhaps without excluding jewellery, the younger generation might want to think about an alternative way of holding gold alongside the natural jewelry element of it. But they might not be so 100% in jewelry. They might want to be 50% jewelry, 50% something else. So I think that's why ETFs are going to grow out of all proportion, because they are physically gold-backed instruments. And I think the younger generation are going to quite relish the idea of buying an ETF with a QR code, as opposed to perhaps buying another bangle. So I'm not saying they won't, but I'm saying now they have an even playing field, and we're seeing the same thing in Japan, same thing in China.
We saw a recent rally in gold prices. And how do you see this price volatility in the last price increase? Is this affect the business, or how this increase in price will change the mindsets?
The great thing about the price rise is that it's brought gold into focus. That's good. That's the good thing. If a lot of people buy gold at very high prices and it suddenly goes all the way down again, a lot of people will not ever be interested again. But that's the same of an Apple stock or an Nvidia stock or a bond. It's not unique to gold. The great thing about it is it's brought the attention of many people to gold such that they understand its value as a long-term hold, not tactical, a strategic hold as part of a portfolio. That is what I hope people are learning from this, because up until this gold price rally, you could argue many people didn't really look at it. Now, they will understand its value. My only hope is that their first experience of investing in gold isn't at such a high price and they live to regret it. I personally think gold is going to continue higher. I think can give you 6 or 7 very good reasons why it will go up, and very few scenarios where it might go down. So I'm very hopeful that it will continue in this way. I understand jewelry purchasers are going to struggle with rapid price rises. Totally understand that. But historically, people have always adjusted. But the investment bar and coin market is going to continue growing.
Can you tell us some steps World Gold Council is taking to increase the gold market, or what are your new things you are doing?
Well, as I briefly mentioned in the conference, I think probably the most important thing to the global gold market, I've mentioned the digitalization. The other most important thing is trying to establish and ratify gold supply chains. A lot of the gold that transmits around the world comes from artisanal and small-scale gold mining. That mining is sustained by the abuse of women and children and the use of mercury in mines. The more people that understand that, the more people I will get buying into my program, which is to try and steer that gold into a formalized sector. Now, everybody who buys gold should be asking, where's it come from? Am I prepared to condone the use of those methods when I buy my gold? Or do I have a choice? And you do have a choice. And I think that's very important. However, many people do not understand that artisanal and small-scale gold mining even exists. And that's a problem. I aim to bring a solution to the global gold market. We have the attention of the US State Department, Global Affairs Canada, the French Foreign Office, and I expect to see this debated at the G7 agenda this year. That is what I'm working towards. But back to the average person in the street. Educate yourselves, understand quite what it is you're holding in your hand and quite who it is that dug that out the ground. You have a choice.
And how do you see India's role in the gold in the future?
How do I see?
India's role in the gold market?
It's massive. It is an enormous gold market. The Indian culture will always support the gold market. That will never change. I think you'll see sectoral shifts within the gold market. If gold had stayed at $1,000, would people be frankly interested in gold ETFs? Perhaps. Would the jewelry market be bigger? Perhaps too. But I think what's been lucky about the changes we've seen in the world is that the relevance of gold is suddenly permeating your society to much younger generations. They're looking at craziness out of the White House. They're looking at craziness around the world. They're looking at this debt of $37, $38 trillion, as you just heard from the minister. And they're wondering, shall I hold gold for investment for the first time in my life? That's a good thing.
Yeah. Thank you so much, David, for your time today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. Very flattered. Anytime
Thank you.
we run into each other,
Yeah.
I'll be happy to talk.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.